Hello there, it's Elliot here, and happy Halloween to you. I thought to mark the occasion I would show you some of the films that I've been watching over this spooky season, and some of the films that I think I'm going to be watching this very night to celebrate the occasion. I have a big stack of horror and Halloween themed movies here, which I'm going to talk about right now, and if you stick around to the end, I'll be talking about some of my all-time favourite horror movies. But anyway, let's get into it. So let's start off with a classic, and I'm sure you've seen this, but if you haven't, it is well worth checking out if you like horror movies. It's Alien, Ridley Scott's classic of the genre, blending horror and science fiction. Just an all-time favourite of mine. It's Jaws in space, that's how it was billed back in the day. And I think this is still such a great film. This is the 4K disc. It looks really good on the 4K disc. So yeah, I absolutely love watching this one when it comes around to Halloween time. Next up is The Witch. This is the 4K disc from Second Sight of Robert Eggers' directorial debut. This is a brilliant film. I really like this, and I know it divides the opinion of some people within the horror community, but I do think it's a great film and definitely a very strong debut film. Another favourite of the season for me is always this next film, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. This one, it just brings me so much joy. This isn't a horror film necessarily. This is a film about horror films. It's very entertaining, very whimsical camp, and Elvira is just such a great character. And I just love this film so much. So if you can get hold of this Arrow Video release, it is well worth it. This next one's a classic, has been talked about so much before that I can't really do it justice here without saying that it's, a classic and a very important film. It's Night of the Living Dead from George A. Romero. This is the Criterion Blu-ray. This has just had a 4K upgrade from Criterion, which I don't yet have my hands on, but I'm hoping to very soon. So for now, I'm going to stick with this one. But this is a real classic. I mean, so many films and horror filmmakers owe so much to this film. It's just so important. A couple of days ago, I watched these next two films back to back. It's The Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. I watched both of these on these 4K discs, which I just picked up, and funnily enough, believe it or not, this was the first time I ever saw both of these films, which is kind of crazy because I consider myself somewhat literate when it comes to films. I've watched thousands of films, but I'm sure we all know there are certain films that we feel like we should have watched, but for some reason we just have never got round to. For me, these two films were parts of that kind of thing. I believe that I should have watched these, and just for whatever reason they escaped me. But I watched them the other day and I really enjoyed both of these. I enjoyed The Evil Dead for, how important it is, how many times it's been referenced since its release, and how inventive it was for such an obviously low budget horror movie. Then we get to The Evil Dead 2, where everything is just taken in a new direction. It's really crazy and really inventive and funny. I did watch it on my own, and I think that if I'd have watched it with a few other people, I probably would have been laughing at every single thing in this film. I still found it funny, but maybe it didn't have the effect it would have had if I was watching it in a group. But yeah, watched these for the first time the other day, and I'm so happy that I have finally now watched them, and I really enjoyed them. Another fun Halloween time movie is Hocus Pocus. This is a classic. This is the 4K disc, which the film looks quite decent on here. It's quite dark in places, maybe darker than it should be, in terms of the visuals, not in terms of tone. But nevertheless, it looks pretty damn good on the 4K disc. I also watched Hocus Pocus 2, which recently got released on Disney+, and that film is just terrible. I really did not like Hocus Pocus 2. So I'd advise just don't waste your time with that. It isn't anything close to what the first film is. I think it's just, a pointless cash grab. Anyway, this one is still a very enjoyable film to watch at this time of year. Another really fun movie to watch at this time of year, and again, this was another first time watch, which, I should have seen this film years and years ago, but for whatever reason, never had. Beetlejuice on the 4K disc. I had an idea of what this film was like. It's been talked about so much in popular culture, but I was not expecting it to be this good. Like, it really made me laugh so much. I loved all of the design of the film, and knowing that it's Tim Burton, of course it was going to be designed so spectacularly. But this one blew me away, and it was just so much fun watching. So yeah, I better not say the name 3 times, but this one I really had a great time with. Just last night I watched Prince of Darkness. This is the John Carpenter movie. This is not one of my favourite John Carpenter movies, I'll just say that at the start. But it is a very good film indeed. It just doesn't hit me as strongly as some of his other films, particularly The Thing, which I think many people see as one of his greatest horror movies. After watching the film last night, I was checking some reviews online, and some people feel very strongly about this one and think it's one of the greatest horror movies of all time. So I think I'm going to need to watch this a few more times to get to that point. But it's a great, fun John Carpenter movie. I also spent an evening with Deep Red, the film from Dario Argento. This is a masterpiece. I love this film so much. It doesn't really make that much sense narratively. Some of the character moments are a bit weird and don't really go together, but it's the atmosphere and just the all-around feel of this film that just captivates me every time. And there are certain moments in this, which I won't spoil, that are so horrific. Even though this isn't, I wouldn't even describe this as a horror film. This is a thriller with horror elements. But there are some scares in this film that are so chilling. And I wish I could talk about them without spoiling them, but I won't do that here. This is a great film. And as we near the end of this list of films that I have been enjoying this Halloween period, we come to some of my all-time favourite horror movies. This next one, I think, might be my favourite horror movie of all time, or it's joint with one other movie which I'm going to be talking about. It's The Innocence. This is the Jack Clayton movie from the 1960s, starring Deborah Kerr, and this is the Criterion Blu-ray, which looks superb. This is a 4K digital restoration from a few years ago. This beats the UK BFI Blu-ray if you have that, so this is definitely worth an upgrade. When I talk about this being my favourite horror movie, that is a very personal thing, because I think when I hear about people's favourite movies, they're all so different and they come from different places. Some people might watch this and not find it scary at all. So people are going to react to different things, but whatever the reason, I find this so chilling. It's dealing with psychological issues. It's dealing with children, perhaps possessions, all this kind of thing. And it just looks superb in the black and white photography. So I might talk about this film very soon, a lot more, as we move into November and Criterion sale season and everything else. But for now, let me just say that this is one of my favourites. Perhaps my favourite, and I think this is what I'm going to be watching tonight. The last film that I'll talk about here, which I think is joint as my favourite horror film along with The Innocence, and this is widely considered the best horror movie of all time. It's The Exorcist, William Friedkin's movie from the 1970s. And yeah, this film has been talked about so much. So many people know this film. I know a lot of people have avoided this film because they just believe it's going to be too scary for them. When it was released 50 years ago, this film famously had people fainting and vomiting and leaving the theatre when it was showing. So it is quite a shocking movie, and I think there's something within horror that I just talked about, the personal aspect of horror. There's something that has to really connect with the viewer to scare them. I can't really do this film justice here. I'm obviously not very good at explaining why this is so good and so scary. It just is. So I'm excited to watch this. I think this is going to be a double bill tonight with The Innocence, and I won't be able to sleep for the next week. If you want to hear more recommendations for great films that you can be watching tonight and this week, then just click the video that's on screen now, where I have plenty more movie recommendations. Thanks very much for watching this video, and happy Halloween.